Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's training session, which is entitled Helping Complex Clients Make Positive Changes in Their Lives. This session is actually part of a series of training videos that we are putting together that we would really like all staff at Back in Motion to see. The specific content for today is around techniques that are associated with motivational interviewing, or as we commonly refer to as MI. MI is really central to how we like to work with all clients here at Back in Motion. Today's session is really very broad, general training that applies to all of the varied clients that we serve in our organization. And the reason that motivational interviewing techniques are relevant to the work that we do here at Back in Motion is because they are designed to help people make important changes in their lives. And so before we delve into the specific approach and techniques, we're going to talk a little bit about what we know about change.
Change is complex. I mean, how many different and varied words did you come up with to describe or that you associate with the word change? So change is complex. The other thing about change is that it is uniquely experienced by each of us. You all came up with different words. In fact, you didn't come across one word that all of you had that you associated with change. So it's a very unique experience. And the third thing about change that I think is pretty clear from this activity is that there are positive and negative sides to change. So it's a complex thing. And so when we are asking our clients to make positive changes, and I think this talk is so relevant to rehab because I was taking a note of your purpose, which is to empower people to achieve positive change. So we need to talk about what that really means and, what are some of the challenges that people face with making changes. My next slide, because change is often difficult. And we see this increasingly in healthcare, right, where people need to make lifestyle changes. They need to change their diet. They need to exercise more. They need to manage illnesses through mechanisms other than medication. All kinds of change we're asking people as it relates to their health. And on the whole, people are not doing very well with that. Take diabetes 2, one of the best examples. It's entirely reversible through lifestyle change, through behavioral changes, but less than 2% of people with type 2 diabetes actually make the changes that they need to make to significantly improve their health. So change is a big deal, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. And we always need to remember that change is difficult. So how do we help complex clients make positive changes in their lives? Let's just talk for a moment about what we think of when we think of a complex client. Tell me what that means to you. Throw out anything that you think makes your clients complex. Not all our clients are complex, but when you think of a complex client, what do you think of?
Resistance to recommendations.
Okay. Struggling to make change.
Yeah.
What do you think of?
Multiple barriers or multiple issues?
Yes, multiple issues. Our client with back pain that's also a bit depressed, has a heavy job, doesn't really like his job that much, doesn't maybe get along all that well with his coworkers, kind of uses too many Tylenol-3 or self-medicates with alcohol. We're getting the idea, right? This is our complex client. And these are the clients that struggle the most with change, right? For the clients that change is relatively easy and straightforward, they don't fall into our complex client category most typically, right? So we see these complex clients, and so when we talk about some of the tools and techniques around motivational interviewing, it's really that client group that we are, the techniques are powerful no matter who you're working with, but it's really this client group that, in my opinion, they really are our very best option if we want to help those clients make the positive changes that they need to make. So motivational interviewing. Do any of you know anything about motivational interviewing? Yeah? A little bit? Anyone know a lot about motivational interviewing?
Not a lot, but I did a presentation too.
Oh, excellent. Okay, awesome. Well, if I get tired, we're going to swap out.
Dueling presentation.
Yeah.
All right, so a couple of really helpful references on motivational interviewing. There's the first reference here is a very good handbook for practitioners. So if you want to hone your skills on motivational interviewing techniques, it's really helpful. And the other is the third edition of Motivational Interviewing by Miller and Rolnick that came out in 2012. And Miller and Rolnick are the original developers of motivational interviewing. Both really good books. The history around motivational interviewing is that the techniques were first developed in the addictions field. Clearly an area where people need to make significant changes and struggle with making those changes. But the principles and techniques, as it turns out, really apply to any setting where a person needs to make a change. So it's being used increasingly in healthcare, helping individuals make changes, as we talk about, with diet and exercise. It's also, a lot of nutritionists are looking at motivational interviewing techniques to add to their approach with their clients, because you can give people all kinds of information around healthy food and they're still eating, pizza and chocolate cake. It's not that they don't know that maybe isn't the healthiest choice, right? And also they're used increasingly in the employment services sector, which is, of course, the other branch of Back in Motion. In addition to rehab services, we have employment services. And there's quite a bit of research going on right now in terms of helping clients with multi-barriers be gainfully employed using motivational interviewing techniques. So it's quite a burgeoning field, and it's, at this point, based on research to date, it seems to be widely applicable in a whole range of settings. All right, so what is it? Well, first of all, it's a collaborative approach. Motivational interviewing isn't something you do to your clients, it's something you do with your clients. It's goal-oriented, which is really important for the work that we do, because all of the work that we do in Back in Motion requires our clients to identify goals, and we support them to achieve those goals. It's a style of communication. And in motivational interviewing, we pay particular attention to what's called the language of change. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Motivational interviewing is designed to strengthen personal commitment to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change, always done within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. And the word elicit here is really important. What we need to elicit really is we need to hear from the client their reasons for making changes. And a lot of the techniques are around how do you elicit that positive change language in the people we work with. Motivational interviewing is done on the using building blocks of tools and techniques that we all already use in the day-to-day work that we do with clients. And that's why it really does fit nicely into the kinds of things that we do here at Back in Motion, because it's on a foundation of providing information to clients. That's a big part of what we do here at Back in Motion, is there's information that it's very useful and important for our clients to have, and we provide that. We work really hard to remove practical barriers to participation and achieving goals. We provide our clients with choice around different approaches and different steps and actions they can take. We identify the benefits of change with our clients. We work with a lot of empathy. We know that the people who come to us, many of them are really struggling. We don't see people when they're in a good place in their life. We see people who have been injured and are frustrated and don't seem to be getting better, and they're not getting along with their partners. Sometimes they're depressed. They're not in a great way, and so we need to have a lot of empathy for the people that we serve. We provide feedback. We are always giving our clients feedback about how they're doing and what's working and what maybe isn't working. We do a lot on goal setting and clarifying goals, and we help. We do active helping wherever we can. So motivational interviewing depends upon these building blocks, which fit very well, as I was saying, with what we do. So there are 4 processes involved in motivational interviewing. These are engaging, which is establishing a working relationship. The second is focusing, which is establishing an agenda. The third is evoking, which is eliciting the client's own motivation to change. And the fourth is planning, committing to a specific course of action. These processes, although I'm going to talk about them in this order, in practice, we're moving within these 4 processes of motivational interviewing all the time. It's not like you do 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, you're done, right? There's overlap and movement back and forth. So let's start with engaging. So engaging is the process of establishing a helpful connection and a working relationship. And it really is a prerequisite for everything that follows with the work that we do with our clients. Clients' engagement in treatment can happen really quickly, and sometimes it can take quite some time. And of course, for our more complex clients, it tends to take longer. They tend to be those clients that come in and they're perhaps a little bit distrustful. Oh, WorkSafe sent me here, you're just going to shove me back to work and I'm not ready and, you're just working for the board. Those are some of our complex clients. So we have to work to build that rapport. But your relationship with your client matters greatly. Client ratings of the quality of their working relationship with practitioners tend to predict both retention in services and successful outcome. So don't underestimate how important the relationship that you have with the people you work with, how important that is. It actually is probably the most powerful thing you have in terms of supporting them to make change. And that isn't unique to motivational interviewing. No matter what kind of interventions you use with clients, if you have rapport and you have trust and they're engaged in your service, they're going to do well. It just tends to be what the research suggests. So ensuring that you have that relationship and taking the time to build that is really important. And it is very important in motivational interviewing in particular. So when we work on building engagement with clients, there really are 4 core communication skills that you want to ensure that you're really good at. The first, and these are not going to be new to you, the first is asking open questions, inviting clients to reflect and elaborate. So not closed questions. Are you married? Do you have any children? How old are they? What grade are they in? Those are not open-ended questions. An open-ended question is, tell me about your family. They're not rhetorical questions. Don't you think things would be better if you went back to work? That's a rhetorical question. We don't want to be asking those kinds of questions. So asking open questions is really important in building rapport because it allows your client to start sharing what they're thinking and elaborating and reflecting. And I don't know about you, but so often when working with clients, it seems to me that they really would like the opportunity to tell their story. And that's a really great way of building some rapport with them. So by asking open-ended questions, you allow them to tell their story. And you guide and direct it to a degree because we can't spend 5 hours having the client tell us our story. But we do it through open-ended questions. We also use the communication skill of affirming. And this is really important in motivational interviewing because it really does rely on the client's own personal strengths, efforts, and resources. Fundamentally for motivational interviewing, it is the client that makes the change. It's not you. So we need to affirm that we respect and honor our client as a person of worth, as a person that's capable of growth and change, and as well as having the choice about whether or not to change. And affirming also means that you recognize and comment upon the client's particular strengths, abilities, good intentions, and efforts. And so we really need to be on the lookout for these. This is a client that it was really hard for them to come today. And so you say that. You say that. I know how tough it was for you to be here today, and I just want to let you know that I think it was so great that you stuck it out for the whole day. You did an awesome job. I know you really find these exercises challenging, and I just want to tell you how great it is that I just saw you do that whole set, and I know it was hard for you, but good job. That's what we mean by looking for and affirming the strengths that our clients bring and that we can see every day. But we need to be on the lookout for them, and we need to tell them that we see that they have these great qualities. And the third is reflective listening, and this is really a fundamental skill in MI. And listening is such a great thing, because if you don't know what to do when you're with a client, then just listen, right? It's just a great thing to fall back on. Just ask them a question and listen, and it just gives you an opportunity to kind of regroup and figure out where you're actually going with the client and what's happening. But more importantly, reflective listening is not just the process of listening, but it's reflecting back what you hear. And reflective statements deepen understanding by clarifying the meaning of what our clients are saying to us. And it allows people to hear again their thoughts and feelings. Sometimes we change the words so they hear them in a slightly different way. And good reflective listening keeps a person talking, exploring, and considering what their options might be. But reflective listening is also necessarily reflective. I think reflective listening gets a bad rap, in movies and things, because you see things like, I had cornflakes for breakfast. So you had cornflakes for breakfast, right? Yeah, and then I went for a walk. Oh, you went for a walk. Like, that's not reflective listening. That's just repeating back everything someone says to you. And so what's important about reflective listening, when we get to some of the evoking aspects of motivational interviewing, it's selective what you reflect back, and you reflect back certain kinds of statements that your client says to you. You don't reflect back everything somebody says to you. In fact, that could be somewhat counter to motivational interviewing. If your client says things like, I hate the workers' compensation board, and you say, oh, you hate the workers' compensation board. What do you think is going to happen when you do that kind of reflective listening? They're just going to get angrier and angrier and angry, and you're just going to work them up into a frenzy, basically. So it's necessarily selective. But the process of listening and reflecting back what we hear is really very powerful for our clients. It also provides them with an opportunity to tell you if you got it wrong, right? So if we reflect back something like, so what you're saying is you're afraid to return to work. No, I didn't say that I'm afraid to return to work. I'm afraid to lift that 500-pound whatever. I'm okay with lots of aspects of work, but that's what I'm afraid to do, right? It provides opportunity to clarify and make sure you really understand what the concerns are that your client has. So these communication skills of asking open-ended questions, affirming, reflective listening, and summarizing, when I talk about these, I typically get some version of this. I don't have time to do that. Do you know how many clients I have to see in a day? How many people I have to work with? I don't have time to listen and reflect back and do this kind of thing. So let me read you something from Motivational Interviewing, because I thought it was a very nice way of addressing that particular issue. Just give me a moment to find it here. Okay, so I don't have time to do this. Busy practitioners sometimes say this about reflective listening in particular and motivational interviewing in general. I already have too much to do in the time that I have with patients, and if I open up this door of listening, I'll never get anything done. I just need to tell them what to do and move on. Yet, a few well-chosen words can save many mouthfuls of busy talk. None more so than in the use of a reflective listening statement that captures the essence of what the person is feeling and saying. When you hit the nail on the head with an accurate reflection, the person feels understood, and there may be little need to explore further. People also tend to repeat themselves when they sense, correctly or not, that they're not being heard. And a good reflection can save time. Just telling people what they need to know or do can feel like having done one's job, and there surely are times when conveying facts is efficient. This is particularly so when the person needs and wants information. When what is needed is behavioral change, however, telling and warning often don't help. If you only have a few minutes to talk and your hope is for behavior change, you don't have time not to use motivational interviewing. So think about that when we spend time listening and reflecting and showing all empathy up front, we save a lot more time down the road, for sure. All right, before we move on to focusing, is there any questions about engaging and the different tools that we use to engage clients? Makes sense? Kind of the basics, right? Around what we do. Okay, good. Focusing. So focusing is the ongoing process of seeking and maintaining direction and clarifying goals. Where is our client headed? Where are they headed short term, like even within a session? We will often say to our clients, so what I'd like to do for the next hour or so is, we might say, I have some forms I'd like you to fill out. I'd like to talk about, what's brought you here today, and make sure I answer any questions that you have. Does that sound like a good plan? We're already focusing when we first meet with a client so that everyone knows what our goal is for that session. We clarify longer term goals. And sometimes the process of clarifying direction and goals can be pretty straightforward, right? But not typically with our complex clients because they're complex. And then even when a direction is initially clear, then stuff kind of happens over the time that we work with clients, and we have to make changes and make adjustments along the way. So we want to consider focusing to be a continuing process rather than a one-time thing. And we see it with clients, right? They're working in a particular direction and then stuff happens and we sit back and we go, okay, maybe we ought to change our approach a little bit or change things up or something's not kind of working and we have to shift focus. And there's three really sources of focus. The most common source of focus is the client. Hi, I want you to help me get rid of my pain. They're pretty clear about what their focus is, right? It's what they come in, it's what they want. The setting guides the focus too. In an OR2 program, focus is improve a person's functioning so that they can safely return to work. That's the focus. An employment service center focuses on helping people who don't have jobs get jobs. If you worked in a smoking cessation clinic, then the focus would be on helping people quit smoke. Mandated program for people convicted of drinking and driving, well, there would be a focus on making sure you don't drink and drive again. And then the third is your expertise. And so we know some things that our clients don't necessarily know, and so sometimes our focus might deviate a bit from what the client's initial focus is coming in. So your client's focused on getting rid of their pain, and you're the OT, you're focusing on ensuring that they can meet their job demands sufficiently to start a graduated return to work. You've got somewhat different focuses going on there. Your client is focused on finding a job, if you're working in an employment center, for example, but you perceive that your client's appearance and hygiene are going to be significant obstacles, and so you know that they're going to need to be the focus of what you're doing as well. So in order to figure out what your focus is, there are generally three styles that you can invoke. The first is a very directive style. It's determined by you. It's rooted in you and your organization's agenda. So OR2, right? We're going to improve your functioning so that you can get back to work safely. Lots of recommendations from you about what the person ought to do. And if you take a really directive style, you can also end up feeling like you are responsible for everything, for the direction, the solution, everything. It's quite a burden to always be highly directive with clients because a lot of responsibility falls on you to make sure it all works out according to plan. And there are times when being directive is of course appropriate, but as your default style, it's unlikely to be helpful in supporting positive change. And then at the other end of the extreme, we have following. And following really is we just focus on the client's priorities. What would you like to talk about today? Maybe they want to talk about how terrible their boss is, so you let them talk all about that. Why, they don't want to go back to work because that boss is so terrible that they know, it's going to be awful. Or maybe they want to talk about how badly WorkSafe is treating them. So then you let's let them go on and on about how awful that is. Maybe they want to talk about the fact that they used to play soccer and now they can't play soccer anymore, and they're really bummed out about that. So if the client raises what seems like a pertinent issue, you'll explore it. Again, there are times when just letting your client talk about whatever they want to talk about can be beneficial because it is actually one of the ways that we establish rapport, as we were talking about before, right? We let our client tell a story and we listen. So it can enhance engagement, but in the end, if you don't shift away from that style at some point, it often doesn't lead to a productive focus in the end. So I don't know if you've ever had that 1 hour meeting with your client and you get to the end of the meeting and you just go, well, that didn't lead to anything productive, right? Chances are it was because you were letting your client completely direct the session. And if it doesn't lead to a productive focus, it makes it more challenging for the client to make positive changes in their behavior, within the time parameters that we have, because that's the other thing, we don't have endless amounts of time to work with our clients and help them achieve these positive changes. So the style that kind of sits in the middle is a guiding style, and that is the style that we use in motivational interviewing. And it's midway between directing and following. And it's a collaborative search for direction. It's a meeting of your expertise in which you focus, and the focus of your sessions to somewhat can be negotiated. The client's agenda is important, and you have to take into account the limitations of the context in which you work. But if you start with a guiding style, then you have flexibility to move to either being more directive, if that's going to be helpful, or to sitting back and following, if that's also going to be helpful. So negotiating focus can look something like, taking a step back because your client has told you a whole bunch of things, right? So this is a client that comes in and they have many barriers. So they've just finished telling you, well, I've got this problem and I've got that problem, and you're trying to focus the session because if I keep going, I'm just going to continue to hear for an hour all of the different things that my client is facing. So a focusing technique that's more guiding would be something like saying, I wonder if we could just step back for a few minutes here and consider what's most important to focus on. I've started making a little mental list in my head of the concerns that you've raised, and I want to check that list out with you. Then we can talk about where you think we might start on the list, and I have some ideas about that too. Would that be okay? So that's just one example of how we move to guiding when a client is really being very directive and we want to focus on something that's going to be helpful. And it's a collaborative process. The client gets to say, well, okay, of all these things, the fact that I can't sleep is driving me the most crazy these days. So would that be a good place to start? Would you like to focus on that first? And we gain client agreement as to where we ought to start with some of the laundry list of difficulties that they might be bringing to our session. And it takes practice. One of the things that I often notice with newer clinicians when I used to do more staff training is that one of the hardest things for them to do was to stop a client. Once a client got going and they're trying to do an assessment and the client is off on, we all have those clients that go off on all kinds of tangents, right? And it's very hard for newer clinicians to be able to just say, I need to stop you there for a moment, right? And I need to go back to, and you've talked about many things, and we need to focus on, right? It's a tough skill because we're so used to wanting to listen and hear what our clients have to say that we can become less focused on focusing that. But it's really important that we do that, and it's important to the benefit of our clients because we need to do something helpful for them. And if we don't help them focus, maybe they come for 3 sessions if they're working with a counselor or a psychologist, and they go, well, nothing happened, right? I just told them everything that was on my mind and nothing happened. So we owe it to our clients to help them focus. Any questions about focusing? Okay. Evoking. So when we're talking about building a working relationship and having a clear focus established, those things are not uniquely motivational interviewing, right? Those are things that we do even if we don't do motivational interviewing. So this third stage is uniquely motivational interviewing, and this is evoking. So what are we trying to evoke in our clients if we're evoking? Any ideas what we're evoking? Well, we are trying to evoke their reasons for change. Through evoking, we want to recognize change talk when we hear it, and we want to further evoke and respond to it when it occurs. That's what evoking means in the context of motivational interviewing. Evoking their reasons for change. But before we get to that, we need to just reflect for a moment on change. And when it comes to change, this is in really big print because it's really important. Ambivalence is normal. So, think about yourself. Think about times in your life when you've tried to make a positive change. Maybe you decided you're going to eat healthier, quit smoking, get more exercise, whatever it might be, yell at your kids less, whatever. It's hard, right? And so, okay, I'm going to eat healthier, and the next thing we know, we're eating that pizza and chocolate cake, right? Well, what happened? You're just not motivated. No, that's not what happened at all. It's that you're ambivalent. Because that's why change is hard, because when we make a change, there are things to be gained and there are things to be lost. Like our love of chocolate cake, right? We love chocolate cake. If we make this healthy change, well, I'm not eating chocolate cake anymore. There's things to be lost and there's things to be gained. And that there are reasons why people are doing what they're doing when they come and see us, right? The status quo, they're doing it because there are things about it that keep them there. And so when they make a change, they're going to lose certain things that are keeping them where they're at now. And so that ambivalence is just a normal part of the process of change. And not only is it a normal step on the road to change, it's also in some ways progress from an earlier state, called pre-contemplation. So motivational interviewing is also linked to the stages of change research that's out there. So when people are pre-contemplative, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. They're not even contemplating making a change. If they're ambivalent, it means that they're contemplating it. And that's actually progress from not even thinking about it at all, not even recognizing that maybe this change would make their life better. And so it is unfortunate that ambivalence is often misinterpreted as resistance or a lack of motivation. Because when that happens, we hear practitioners start to say, oh, that client's just not motivated, right? And when we say that, we do a huge disservice to that client because A, it's not true, and B, there's a tendency to give up on that client because, well, they're just not motivated. So if you get nothing else out of this presentation today, what I hope you get out of it is to strike the word unmotivated out of your vocabulary when you're talking about clients. They're not unmotivated. they're ambivalent. And that's okay, because ambivalence is normal. We just need to figure out what to do. How do we help our clients when this ambivalence bubbles to the surface when they're trying to make these changes? That's what's important. But they're not resistant. They're not unmotivated. They're just ambivalent. And we just need to recognize that that's normal. So what do we do with ambivalence? Well, we explore ambivalence rather than think resistance. And then what we do is we develop a discrepancy between a present behavior, something that we see our clients doing or not doing, and their goals and values. To do this well, you need to know your client's goals and values. And so I'd like you to think about some of your clients. And if I were to ask you, what does your client want to improve their function? Why is that important to them? Would you know the answer to that for each client that you work with? It would be helpful to know that. Why is work important to them? If work's not important to them, what is important to them? People want to get better for all kinds of reasons. And so it's helpful to know what those reasons are for each person that you're working with. And in order to know this, we need to ask lots of questions about our clients' aspirations, about their goals, about their dreams. You know, what would your life look like if you had a job? You know, in the employment division of our company, we ask that question a lot, right? Tell me what your life would be like if you had a job. Envision, what does that future mean? And it means different things for different people. Some people say, well, it would mean I would have enough money that I wouldn't have to go to the food bank. Okay, great. Someone else says it would mean that I could, talk to people and engage with adults. I've spent the last 8 years, as a stay-at-home mom, and if I had a job, I could talk to adults and engage in intelligent conversations. Maybe I could meet a friend. I had one mom say to me, if I had a job, I would be able to make enough money to take my 2 daughters on a holiday. We've never been on a holiday before because I've never been able to afford it. That's what having a job means to me. So having a job, getting back to work, improving our function means different things to different people, and you never want to assume that you know why somebody wants to make this change, because it's very individual. And I really believe that the greatest impact that we have in the work that we do with our clients really is in the questions that we ask them. There's a lot of power in questions. And I think in many ways they're much more impactful than anything that we actually say to our clients. So an example of developing a discrepancy might be something like, you were telling me last week how important it is for you to be able to give your baby a bath again. These exercises will help you reach that goal. I see, though, that you're not doing them. You're just pointing out a discrepancy. But to do that, you needed to have heard when they told you last week that bathing their baby was important to them, because that's the only way that you can point out the discrepancy in their behavior, because you know that that's a goal. You really want a job. You told me that last week, but you haven't followed through in updating your resume. There's no judgment. There's nothing but the discrepancy. And now the ball's in their court to talk about that with you. So that's what we mean by developing a discrepancy between present behavior and the client's goals and values and what's important to them. Because when a behavior is seen as conflicting with a goal, then the change is more likely to occur. It's like, right, these exercises are really helping me, and I really do want to be able to do that. They might say to you, but that one is really hard, and I really struggle with doing that, and you as their physio might say, well, you know what, there's a way that we can adjust that exercise a little bit so that it is more manageable for you. Would you like to try that as an option? So that you can do things with it. Right? And all you've done is point out this discrepancy between what they really want, what they've told you they want, and how their behavior is getting in the way of what it is they want. Always, with ambivalence, it's the client rather than the practitioner that should present the argument for change. So, you've got this client, they're not doing what they need to be doing in the gym, for example, and you say to them, you really should be doing these exercises because that's what's going to help you get better. What do you think happens? So now you're arguing the reason for change, right? The changes from not doing them to doing them. You need to get more active. And that's what's going to help you get better. What do clients typically say to you when you say that to them? Do they go, "You're right. I'm sorry. I'll get right on it"? They say, "Yeah, but it hurts to do these exercises." And you say, "Yeah, I know, but if you do them, then you're going to be able to get back to work." Well, I'm not ready to go back to work, and even if I did these exercises, that's not going to help me get back to work. No, really, if you do these exercises, then that's really going to improve the whatever on your arm, and then you're going to be able to get back to work. Well, that's not what my doctor told me. My doctor told me that really what I need to do is rest for another 6 weeks. So the point being that with a person who is ambivalent, the more you argue for change, the more they will argue all the reasons for the status quo, all the reasons for not changing. And what occurs when people verbalize something? What does it do to their belief? It just entrenches it even more. So every time you argue for why someone should do something, and they tell you all the reasons why they shouldn't, you've just entrenched that belief that much more in them. So if you find yourself in that position of arguing for change, you just need to shut up, because it doesn't help for you to say why they should change. What helps is for them to say why they should change. And it's a trap that we can easily get caught in. It's an easy trap to get caught in because we have the information, right? We do know that if they would complete these activities and increase them over time and do a graduated return to work, that they would get better. We do know that that's true. But it is of little value to continually point that out to a person, because they'll tell you all the reasons why that's just not going to work out for them. Thanks anyway. All right. So just a few pointers to remember. The client is not your opponent. It's not a battle for you to, push, do. It's not about winning and losing. And it's not about convincing. Because we have a lot of knowledge, sometimes we think if I just keep explaining to the person why this is going to work and why this is a good idea, I'm just going to convince them. It doesn't work. Not with complex clients with ambivalence. And it's not about telling someone what to do. It's really not helpful to tell people what to do. And if you're asked for advice, giving a set of options is really your best option rather than saying, well, do this. And remind yourself and the client of their autonomy. The client has the choice, and it really is their choice what they're going to do. It's important not to be personally or emotionally invested in whether or not your client makes a change, because it's actually not about you. It's about them, and they get to choose. And we respect whatever choice they make. We help them understand the consequences of the various choices that they make, but they get to choose. It is their choice what they're going to do. And I often say to clients, well, this is your decision to make. What would you like to do? The client is the primary resource for finding answers and solutions. So if you're not used to asking your clients what they would like to do, it might be something to get used to, because we need to be asking them that a lot. A client might say to us, well, I'm supposed to go back to work next week, and I can't go back. Then we say, well, okay, so you know that your program with us is ending on Friday, so what would you like to do? Their choice, right? They can say, well, I don't want to start my graduated return to work, and then we can say, well, all right, so let me lay out for you what then happens if that is the choice that you make. They might not make that choice if you explain that. Well, what are my other options? Well, we can talk about, we can revisit your graduated return to work plan, and if there's some adjustments that we could make that would make you feel more comfortable going forward, well, we could do that. Is that something you might like to do? We could call your employer and see if your employer has any other job options for you that you might feel more comfortable doing. Would you like to try that? We could call your case manager and explain to them that you don't feel ready to return to work. Would you like to do that? It's what would you like to do at this point? Because it's their choice, not really yours. So that's what we mean by the client's autonomy. We can help them, we can lay out some choices for them, presuming there are some choices, and that there's always choices, right? You can do something, you cannot do that. There's always consequences to whichever choice you make. And it really is up to the client to make those decisions. All right, so there are two sides to ambivalence. Change talk versus sustain talk. So change talk, those are statements that indicate some movement in the direction of change. This is when your client says things like, I am so fed up with this pain, I need to do something about this. Or a client says, well, I suppose, on the employment side, I suppose I could at least update my resume. That's some indication of movement in the direction of change. Sustain talk, statements that indicate support for the status quo. Well, I don't think I'm ready to get a job. I don't see how that would help me. That's sustain talk. So when you come across sustain talk, do not explore or directly challenge sustain talk. So when a client says, well, I'm not ready to return to work, you don't want to ask the question, well, why aren't you ready to go back to work? What's the question you might want to ask instead? What are some things that would help you feel more ready to return to work? Don't ask them why they can't go back to work, because believe me, if it's a complex client, you are going to get a whole bunch of reasons. And as they articulate all those reasons, what are they doing? Right, I can't go back to work. I got this problem, I got that. It's just going to solidify that belief that I can't go back to work. What prevents you from doing that? And why haven't you done something? Why haven't you done your exercise? I'm sorry, you probably would never say it like that, but you never would want to ask that question, why haven't you done your exercises? What is another question you could ask to try to understand what's going on?
What made it difficult for you to do the exercises?
Yeah. Or what happened? I noticed you didn't do your exercises today. What's happening for you? What's going on? You missed coming in yesterday. Rather than, why didn't you come in yesterday? It's, what happened yesterday? What happened is a very non-threatening, great way to understand what's happening for your client. Why haven't you done something? Typically, even if we don't intend it to, when we say, why didn't you come in yesterday? It typically leads to lots of rationalizations, justifications, defensiveness. But if we simply ask what's happening, what happened, you're more likely to get a deeper response to that. So be careful to not directly explore sustained talk when your client says things to you like, I can't go back to work, I'm not ready, because it will only continue the sustained talk. And be careful with empathic statements so that you're not accidentally encouraging sustained talk. So strategies for responding to sustained talk. We've talked about a few already and different ways to ask things. Reflection with a twist is one example of what you can use. So if a client says something like, I can't go back to work, you might say something like, so you prefer things as they are. No, I hate it here. Oh, so, okay. So now you got something to work with, right? You just twist what they said a little bit to point out that the implication of what they're saying is that, okay, coming here is, this is what I want to do, right? Double-sided reflection. So it's so easy and comfortable to sit on the couch and watch TV for most of the day, and at the same time, you like the idea of spending time with your colleagues and making more money. Emphasizing autonomy. I'm not ready to return to work, and it's certainly your choice. No one can make you go back to work. Our program will be coming to an end next week, so what would you like to do at this point? Reframing, which is just an alternative meaning to something a client has said. I've been through so much lately, I don't know if I want to take this on too. You've been through so much and still here you are. You are quite a survivor. So those are just some different ways that we can handle sustained talk when it comes out without deepening it. Change talk. Evoke change talk by asking open-ended questions. So this is where the questions we ask are very powerful. Change talk, these are the reasons for change. So anytime a client touches upon the positive side of change or the negative side of the status quo, then you want to ask questions, and you want to ask questions around their desire, their ability, their reasons, their needs. So for example, they might say something like, I really want my life back. That's a great positive change talk, right? If I could get over this shoulder problem, I would be able to work in my garden again. I should be doing my fair share of the housework. Those are things that tell you that there's a direction for positive change. You want to use lots of affirmations when you hear this. Comment positively on what the person has said. If they say, my wife would be happier if I went back to work, well, it sounds like you really care about her and what she thinks. I don't think it's good that my children see me sitting at home every day instead of going to work. Sounds like being a strong role model is important to you, right? So this is where you're reflecting, you're using reflective listening, and as I was saying earlier, these are the kinds of things that you want to use your reflective listening techniques for. When you reflect change talk, it usually leads to more change talk, and that's what we're aiming for. Right, any questions about evoking? It really is the unique part of, or the crux, if you will, of motivational interviewing. Okay, planning. So when we're evoking those positive statements that allow for our clients to change, and we're doing that with complex clients, it's a slog because there's a lot of the status quo talk too that you're having to fight your way through. So it can really feel like an uphill battle. And you know, you work your way up the hill and you slide a few steps back and all that ambivalence boils up again, and you really have to pay a lot of attention to what you're saying and where you're headed with your client. But when you get your client to a place where they can do some planning, that actually feels like a lot more fun, right? Because they are ready. But you still have to be a little bit careful, right? Now it's like going downhill, which is a lot easier than going uphill, but you know, you can still run into trees or over a cliff. So you still have to be careful in the planning phase, because if you push clients too hard, then you can see the ambivalence bubble up again, right? And when you're planning, it's still motivational interviewing. It's still a collaborative process in which you're evoking your client's own ideas. And remember that ultimately the choice is theirs to make in terms of whether they're going to carry it out. So you want to look, if you're ready to start planning, you want to look for signs of readiness. You're looking for increased change talk. You're looking for a lot less sustained talk, increased resolve, and envisioning. And by envisioning, we really mean that the client talks more about how they envision their future once they've made the change. Oh, when I'm back at work and up at full hours, my life's going to be normal again. I'll have that routine that's so important to me. It's going to stabilize my family life again, and they're really envisioning what this is going to look like for them. And then some more questions from you when it comes to planning. So where does all this leave you? What do you think you might do? What's your next step? And they need to guide that process as much as possible. That's why whenever we're doing any kind of goal setting with clients, that needs to be their goals. We don't meet as a team and set our clients' goals for them, right? We need them to set the goals of what they want to achieve. But planning generally is the easier part. And all the time you're checking for and strengthening commitment. Is that what you intend to do? So in order to get this going, what would you have to do first? How would you get ready? Are you willing to give that a try? All right. So in summary, motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversational style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. The key elements are engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. And as I mentioned at the beginning, throughout our time with clients, we're always working with these 4 things. We always ensure that we have rapport and trust and that they stay engaged. We continually seek to ensure we have a clear focus. We don't want to waste our or our clients' time. And we want to always be evoking so clients can hear themselves articulate their reasons for change. We can set some plans in motion early on, and sometimes we have to tackle more challenging areas a little bit later. The overall style is one of guiding, which lies between directing and following. Ambivalence is a normal part of the change process. When we argue for change with a person who is ambivalent, it naturally brings out the person's opposite arguments. And finally, people are more likely to be persuaded by what they hear themselves say than by anything you say. All right, great. Well, thank you so much for your attention, and I'm curious to see how this all turned out on the video.